You're watching Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonprofit public affairs network, engaging the citizens of Wisconsin since 2007 through access to government proceedings and public policy events.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. We have another day of legislative session. Today's session is about making sure the people of Wisconsin have a voice in their government. During this past year, we've said far too many times where government and the governor went too far. They did repeated health emergencies without legislative approval. We did executive orders shutting down businesses and closing places of worship, and many of which either had to be overturned by a court or only reluctantly not being enforced today. Here we are trying to make sure that, number one, we are starting to see the light at the end of the COVID tunnel. And I think that is something that everybody can be happy about. Schools are finally reopening. Our lives are beginning to return to normal, and that's something we should all celebrate. We now need to take the necessary steps, as an example, to make sure we get state workers back to the table to deliver the services they are being paid to do. We need to make sure that the federal dollars that are coming to Wisconsin have the ability for the public to know where they are going before the dollars are spent, that we do it in a transparent process, and that we really focus on having the right priorities for our small businesses, our citizens, and the systems that rely on these dollars. We do want to begin today with an issue that continues to plague the state, and that is making sure that we guarantee that every single person in the state who wants to vote is able to do so, but that everybody who votes also has confidence in the election system that we have here in our state. We are going to begin today's press conference with Representative Joe Sanfilippo, who is authoring a resolution to allow for this to proceed. Representative Sanfilippo. Sorry.
So our resolution today is authorizing the Campaigns and Elections Committee to do an investigation into the administration of our elections from January 1st, 2019 to the present. And this is important because over the past year and a half, we've heard allegations of improprieties being done, specifically state laws on the books not being followed. So this resolution lays the foundation so that going forward, as our committee investigates the administration of our elections, should we determine that a need arises where we need to subpoena people or documents, we're laying the groundwork for being able to do that according to state statutes. It's my hope that we never even have to use this process, because I think it's in everybody's best interest to be open and forthcoming on how our elections are administered throughout the state. I can't honestly see why anybody would not want to answer questions or provide documentation, but this just gives us the necessary tools we need to go forward. In the end, we want to make sure that everybody is confident in our elections going forward so that we have a good process. We have people who want to vote and people who are willing to run for office. And now I'll turn it over to Representative Thiesfeld.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have three bills on the calendar today, AB 23, 24, and 25. All of them have somewhat the same theme, that having to do with the coronavirus vaccination. AB 23 would prohibit government officials from mandating the COVID-19 vaccination. AB 24 would prohibit the closure of places of worship over the COVID-19. And then AB 25 prohibits employers from mandating the COVID-19 vaccination. Just general thoughts on them. While certainly the vaccination is a blessing to be able to have that, it has not gone through the entire process that normally is done by the FDA. And people ought to be able to say no to a vaccine that does not have full approval. It has only emergency approval. Places of worship. We have First Amendment rights in this country to be able to worship, and other than perhaps a short-term closure, to make sure we understood short-term closure so that we understand what is before us. The government should not be prohibiting places of worship from opening to parishioners. So I will end it at that, and I'll turn it over to Representative Rozar.
Thank you. As a freshman legislator, just let me take this opportunity to briefly introduce myself to the press corps. My name is Donna Roser. I am the representative from the 69th Assembly District, and I live in Marshfield. I am a nurse by profession. I have been teaching since 2008 at the Marian University in Fond du Lac and the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire College of Nursing at the Marshfield site. I have been working as a cardiac medical surgical nurse for about the last 20 years, and I am now retired from both of those positions. I am a Wood County Board Supervisor and have been so since the year 2000 and reelected every 2 years. I've held various leadership positions in Wood County and am currently the chair of the Wood County Health and Human Services Committee. So I am introducing today AB 89, which is relating to return to in-person work for the state employees. This bill requires the governor to submit to the legislature no later than 21 days after the bill is signed into law a plan for when all state employees will return to in-person work at the agency office where their duties were performed prior to working from home. The bill does not require employees to return to in-person work. It simply asks for a plan for doing so. Moreover, this bill does not address the merits of in-person work, although those merits are numerous, nor does it address the safety of in-person work. These side issues can be incorporated into the plan if the governor so chooses to do so. There are budgetary implications to this requirement. The state spends significant dollars on maintenance, utilities, and insurance of state-owned buildings, as well as leases for office space and buildings where few, if any, employees are working. There are also two issues in the 2021-23 capital requests. One is for a new Milwaukee State office building at a budgeted cost of approximately $164 million, and there's a $4 million ask to begin the preliminary design plan for the redevelopment of the existing Jeff 1 building. Why would you spend money, significant amounts of money, on office space with no plan for employees to come back to work? A plan on when employees will turn to in-person work is all the legislature wants from the governor. Having a plan helps guide the direction of our state, especially during budget discussions. Time and resources are more easily managed with a plan. The governor should set an example with a plan to return state employees to in-person work as businesses across the state make plans to bring employees back to in-person work. I don't know how many of y'all saw the New York Times this morning. The New York mayor has come up with a plan to return 80,000 employees in New York to in-person work. Those office workers will return on May the 3rd, and I was glad to see this, and hopefully it will be impetus for our governor to do the same. Mr. Speaker?
Okay. I thought there was another person. I'm sorry. So with that, we are happy to take any questions from people.
Speaker, Democrats and the governor expressed some concerns about allowing the legislature to have oversight on how federal funds are spent because it could slow down the process of, getting out funds right away to those impacted by the pandemic. Your response to that it would slow down things?
Sure. Well, first of all, we know that the governor has 4 years to spend the money. So I certainly think with the ability to come and work with us over the next 4 years, we could find ways to work together to do it in a speedy process. If they would say to us, similar to what was done in the past, because don't forget, this is a process that is very similar to one utilized when Democrats had United Control in 2009. I served on the Finance Committee under Chairman Pocan at the time. They passed legislation which allowed the Finance Committee to have oversight and review of what was called the ARA funds, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It was done on a bipartisan basis. They came to the legislature, asked for the ability to spend the money. Many times I voted yes. I don't remember voting no. I'm sure I might have. But most of the time we agreed with what the governor was spending the money on. So it seems to me that if it worked fine under previous administrations with significantly less dollars, there's already a precedent that's set that we could do it here. Unfortunately, it seems like the Democrats want to have a piggy bank where they can choose to give the money with no oversight, no transparency, no ability to judge whether or not it's the best decision until after the money's already out the door. That's just not the way the founders intended for us to spend money. It's why in almost every process around the world, you have more than one branch of government deciding how taxpayer dollars are spent, except in this case, unless we pass the bill.
Democrats are calling again for gun safety legislation. After Boulder, I asked Minority Leader Hintz what specifically he'd like to see come through this body, and he mentioned universal background checks. In 2019, a Marquette poll found that had 80% support among Wisconsin voters. Where does your caucus stand on specifically expanding background checks?
Yeah, well, we know that the vast majority of weapons that are purchased in the state already go through a background check process. We already have the federal system. We know that it's a very limited number, especially now with COVID, where you do not have anywhere near the number of gun shows and all those things. So, I have not seen exactly how, in the circumstances that they described, that the guns were obtained. But if they were done lawfully, it seems like we already have a process. And if someone chooses to break the law, there's very little that we can do besides arrest them after they've committed the act.
Do you believe it would be safer, though, to expand background checks, however marginal that increase may be?
I have no idea. We do not know based on data. I have not seen data that shows that it is significantly safer. We already have the system in place where the vast majority of weapons already go through that background check process. That's, I think, the one that we should focus on as opposed to potentially some of those that we don't necessarily know.
Do you have an update on whether or not the Assembly will extend the 1-week suspension on unemployment benefits?
We actually have not talked about that. We are caucusing again tomorrow, and we'll bring that up.
Speaker, the state committee already authorized an audit into the Wisconsin elections earlier this year. How would this investigation under this resolution differ from what that audit is trying to accomplish right now?
Yeah, so we want to make sure that when we have our package of bills that we bring forward, we have some that have already been authored by members of the Assembly and the Senate, many of which I support. But I also want to make sure that if we see that there are other issues with not following the current law, that we know what those are. We've seen what's happened in Green Bay, where it appears to me, but I don't have all the facts, that certainly the people who were involved in the election doubt the way that it was conducted in one county. We have had reports around the state of other situations, and I think those will be coming forward as well, where people doubt the way that the existing laws were enforced and enhanced. So the audit is going to go through and look at what happened in the last election, what is able to be quantified, and that's one of the things that we want to do. But I also think that making sure that we have the ability to go through the process where it's a little bit more public, because the audit committee, the auditors go out and look for the information. They don't necessarily have public hearings or seek public input. They do kind of the behind-the-scenes work, which is going to be very valuable. We'd like to have one that's a more public process where people can actually come in and we can do a better job investigating than just having a simple hearing. So I think you're going to see the ability for us to once and for all root out where there were issues, find solutions that hopefully everybody can buy into so that when 2022 comes, people have absolute confidence that whoever wins the election did so fair and square.
Why do you need a resolution to do that? Why can't they just go out and they've already held one hearing on Green Bay? Can't they do everything they need to do, including issuing subpoenas without a resolution, or does this give them some greater power?
Yeah, I can let Representative Sample answer that.
So under statutes, I believe it's 1331, but it's at least Chapter 13. In order for the Speaker to have the authority to issue a subpoena, we have to first have a formal investigation started. So this is laying the groundwork. And as I repeated before, I'm hoping and I would expect that we really don't have to come to that. I think that this is going to be an open and honest discussion, and I can't understand why any elected official in this state would not want to talk openly and publicly about the administration of elections in their areas. But in the event that something does occur where we would need to subpoena records or people, then we will have this ability at our disposal.
Okay, thank you.
I also want to ask you, we're talking about vaccines today. Do you all plan to get vaccines? Are you promoting the idea that people should get vaccinated, or any of you have reservations about doing it for yourself?
Yeah, I absolutely plan on getting the vaccine as soon as my turn is up. I want to make sure that everybody that's more vulnerable than me has that opportunity to do so first. Make sure our healthcare workers, our frontline workers, everybody 65 and older is able to get it. I believe it's safe and effective. And I have no issues getting that vaccine. But again, it's a personal choice, and my personal choice is to get it.
Roger, thank you. You get it?
Thank you.
You get the vaccine?
Yeah. Thank you.
This program is a production of Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Eye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civic broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.